All right, as I get this set up, can you guys do me a favor? And as I'm trying to get the technology to work, if you guys could get up and sit with someone else that you haven't sat with already. You guys could do that right now. So I wanted you guys to get to know each other a little bit because some of you have traveled, I think the furthest is 8,000 miles to be here. And so it'd be a shame if you didn't get a chance to meet someone who has traveled that far. And you'll get a chance to do that and meet more people over the course of the next 4 days. But I want to jump in real quickly. I know it's early on a Monday. Technically, school doesn't start at Berkeley until next week, so you guys are already way ahead of the curve. But I want to jump in real quick and transition from what Iklak was talking about with storytelling, with pay it forward, all of these elements that are key to being an entrepreneur. And I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper into those concepts and explain to you guys why we teach the way we do. Iklak talked about what we teach and what elements are part of it. But I want to tell you why and how, because you guys will spend the next 4 days, as Iklak said, playing some games. And I want you guys to know why we're doing that. So, what do entrepreneurs do? And Iklak gave you one way of viewing it. I want to give you a different one, which is just slightly different, which it comes down to 3 basic things. What does an entrepreneur do is, one, they do things in a social setting. Almost everything that we know about an entrepreneur, we usually see on TV, and it's either Mark Zuckerberg on stage by himself, or Steve Jobs, or Gates, and it's just them on stage, right? But there's armies of people behind these people, and if you take a look at what startups really do, it's a collaborative group effort. It's never really about that front guy. That front guy probably was just voted to be the front person, to speak for the company. That doesn't mean they're the most talented technically or the most brilliant marketing person. Oftentimes, they're just the best spokesperson for the company. So it is a social activity that you're involved in. Second thing that entrepreneurs do is fail all the time, constantly. Every day is a battle against failure. If you don't like failing, I mean, no one really likes failing, right? But if you really hate failing so much that you just can't deal with it, you're going to find entrepreneurship being very, very difficult. Because the only way you know something is when it breaks or it fails. So you need to get used to that second thing. And then the last thing is you're dealing with something new, something brand new. You are introducing something. If you're doing technology entrepreneurship, most likely it is something that the world has never seen before. So it is incredibly difficult to teach you guys these things. How do we teach you guys to be more social, other than this little social experiment we just did, right? How do we teach you guys to be okay with failure? And certainly, how do we teach you guys to bring something new into the world? It's very difficult to do this stuff. So when I talk to people about teaching innovation, of course, the first thing they look at me and they go, is that even possible to do, is to teach it? And I turn around and I say, I think it's the wrong question to ask. And by the way, that's a really good trick if you don't know the answer to a question. It's just say that it's it's a wrong question to ask, right? So you're gonna hear me say that a lot, because rather than admit I don't know the answer, I will say that. But I think it's the wrong answer. It's not a matter of whether you can teach it. It's a matter of whether you can learn it. Of course, I'm dumping the onus on you to learn this stuff. But it's like multivariable calculus. Not everyone can learn it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't teach it, right? So it is important to look at this as your responsibility to learn this. It is not our responsibility to necessarily teach you, because you're doing something new. By definition, we may not even have the words to give you to understand what you're doing, because you're doing something new, okay? And to give you kind of background as to why this is difficult for most of you guys to do. You guys are either at Berkeley or some other university around the world that's doing advanced activities in research and science. So you have similar educations, I would point out. And by the way, do you guys know what animal this is? Can someone? Crow. Can those of you who haven't heard this part of my lecture, can you tell me what the crow is famous for? Say louder. I've not heard that before. They're actually very social creatures. I'm sorry, what? Scream. They're known for screaming. What? Danger. Yeah. So they symbolize danger and death. They do remember faces. In fact, they are considered one of the most intelligent animals on the planet. They're so intelligent that we've had to rewrite biology books over and over until now they're almost at parity with primates. They have done studies. There's a professor up at the University of Washington that has done studies, and they have proven that a crow not only transfers information to its siblings, but to its young. The young will transfer that information to its young. It is generationally intelligent. It passes information along and can recognize faces and can use tools. And this is why, as we look at comparing intelligences, crows are incredibly fascinating because they can use tools like this without being trained to do so to pull food out of crevices to eat the food. But what's more interesting for you guys is that the crow has been proven to use tools, not only to use them, but to make them. Okay? In this exercise, it sees that the food it can't reach without using a stick. It can't reach that long stick, so it has to use the small stick to pull the long stick out to get the food. Now, that's a second-order problem set, right? It has to figure out how all of this works, and it can do it without prompting. And there's actually a great video on YouTube if you look at it. There's a 7-step exercise that a crow has to go through to get the food, and if he doesn't do it in the right order, he can't get the food. He does it perfectly in the right order. And the reason I bring this up is because I have students at Berkeley who cannot do this. Okay? That sounds funny, but it's true. I have students who cannot make their own tools. If you do not put the formula in front of them, they don't know what to do. And this is because we have spent your entire college career, your entire educational process, teaching you like this. We've given you formulas, we've given you instruction sets, and then given you examples to ask you to continue to practice these things until you memorized them, right? But you haven't really learned to create your own tools, right? And all we then do is test whether you've retained this knowledge. This is actually, it's good to know all this information, all this science and all this math and all of, language skills, but it's toxic when we're looking at being innovative. Because with all that deductive education, you're going against the grain of how your brain is structured. Your brain is structured to look at results and then come up with the reason why. It's not sitting there waiting for instructions. It's starting to figure out, as almost a detective, to figure out why something is the way it is. And that is the basis of entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur discovers something is an opportunity because they look at something and say, why is it that way? Why is it inefficient? Why do I have to wait 30 minutes for a cab in San Francisco? Maybe I could create a system to let people become cabs themselves, right? That's an inductive reasoning process where someone is saying something and tried to figure out why it is the way it is, right? But if you've been educated like we've been educated in the West, that activity has been beaten out of you. And so I was going to leave this out of my slide deck, but I was asked, since we're talking about storytelling, I would throw this in there. Full disclosure, that is not me. So I do have a cute baby picture, but I'm twice this size because I ate like a pig when I was a child. And if there's anything that I've ever learned in teaching students at Berkeley, never put anything on a slide that you do not want it show up on Facebook or Twitter. So I have judiciously left my personal picture out. But imagine this is what I looked like when I was a kid. Okay, I was born in Korea. A little storytelling here for you. I was born in Korea, and when I was 5, I was adopted into the U.S. And so I went from being able to speak with everybody to not being able to speak to anyone. So I learned English on my own, inductively. There was literally not a Korean in sight. Wasn't even a dry cleaner that owned, there was Koreans there. Literally, it was me. So I learned it very quickly. But when I hit 3rd grade, and you have to learn this concept called cause and effect, right? It's pretty basic. One is a cause, the other is effect. I was a great student except for this concept where I was getting 100% wrong, which is weird. How do you get cause and effect wrong? And how do you get it 100% wrong, right? It's like flipping them, right, which is what I was doing. So my teacher pulled my parents in and said, we don't know what's going on. He might have a learning disability. We don't know why he has like cause and effect flipped, but everything else he's doing great. And so I just learned whatever I thought was the right answer, I just flip it, and I would get the right grade. I never really realized what was going on, what the issue was, until I took Korean in college here at Berkeley, which I don't advise you to do if you want a good grade, just telling you right now. If you know English, the word because, which is critical to cause and effect, right? In English, the sidewalk was wet because it was raining. The word cause, or it was raining is the cause, which follows the word because, and the effect is prior to that. But if you look at Korean, the word because is in the middle of the sentence still, but it was raining is prior to that word. What I was doing when I was trying to teach myself English was using the rules that I had learned about Korean and applying them to English. That's just how my brain was doing it, right? And I was getting it 100% wrong. I point this out because we have been teaching you guys deductively to think like a student, to do well in these classes, and you're going to apply those to startup world and you're going to fail. And let me point out how this works. Risk reward. You don't want to look dumb in class. You don't want to look dumb from your professor. You don't want to look like the guy who doesn't know the answer, right? But in startup land, you have to risk being wrong. Every day, you have to put yourself out there, right? When it comes to ethics, or the ethos, right, with student mentality, it's all about perfection. It has to be perfect or I can't get the A. But as Iklak talked about, if you have the ethos of just good enough, you'll have time to do other things that are just as critical. In terms of collaboration, students are expected to know the answer before the professor even asks the question, right? But in startup land, you have to ask for help. I can't tell you how many startups I work with who wait to the last moment where they have no more money, they're dying, and they're asking for help, right? That is not the time to ask for help, right? That's the time to look for a job. The time to look for help was about 2 months prior to that, right? So you got to raise your hand and ask for directions. I know stereotypically guys don't like to ask for directions. Ask for directions. Student mentality, you're tested individually. How many of you guys have been tested as a group before? You got a grade because you were tested as a group? Raise your hand. All right. So some of you guys have, right? We're starting to move towards that because in the real world, you're rewarded as a team. It doesn't matter if your code compiles. If the other guy can't sell it, you all fail, okay? In student mentality, everyone is a competitor. I know we have lots of French students in here who had to take the prépa, right? Yeah, you guys are all laughing because it was painful, right? I love that the French laugh at things that are painful. Everyone's a competitor, right? To get into, HEC, to get into Polytechnique, right? But in startup land, everyone is a resource. In the last startup I created, I had the cell phone numbers of the CEOs of every one of my competitors. And we would meet fairly regularly, because you go to the same conferences, and you would compare notes, because you're all competing against Google, right? So you have to co-opetition is the name, right, of this concept. So if you look at how you have been trained as students to think this way, this is the culture of academics, right? The culture of startup land is over here. So if you apply what you have learned in school to startups, you will inevitably fail. This will be a painful process for you. So this is why we teach by having you guys play. We want to roll back the time to the point when you were 5 years old and you were an inductive reasoner and you're always asking yourself, why is the world is the way it is? because that's the activity you're going to do, is constantly ask questions about why is it the way it is. So you'll see a lot of succinct lectures. It'll go quickly, very quickly. Information will be thrown at you guys. We will focus heavily on the psychology and culture of entrepreneurship. We will use the voice of the practitioner. You will have lots of people who have done this before up here telling you from their vantage point how they got there. It's a short time frame. We're here to build muscle memory. This is why games are so important. It's one thing to be taught this, where we're constantly talking to you. It's another thing for you guys to experience it while you're here. And that's why we play games. And these are the types of games we play: puzzles, social games, and Legos. What can you learn from these games? You can learn strategy, of course, right? Problem solving, using resources, collaborating and competing with others. But most importantly, what we want to see is, how do you behave in groups when you're under stress? Are you a good actor? Do you withdraw? Do you share information? Do you not share information? All of this is important because this is how you'll probably behave when you're in a startup. And if you don't like the behaviors that you're showing while you're in a game setting, you probably want to adjust that when you start your company. Because no one wants to start a company with someone who hoards information, or doesn't play fairly, or just doesn't communicate or contribute. So you need to see how you behave in this game, because it will be an indicator. Because entrepreneurship is a team sport. He's kind of excited there, right? How do you behave in a group? How do you share or hoard information, like I was talking about? Trust is really key here. This is really hard to teach. Some of you guys come from non-trusting cultures. And what I mean by that is that it's very difficult, because of history, to have business transactions of trust. And so it might be very foreign to you to be giving someone free advice or doing a deal for free, because that just doesn't feel right from where you're from. But those are things you need to explore, because those are key to a successful startup. Also, we want to know how you deal with conflict. A lot of you guys think conflict is bad. Conflict is the best thing you can have in a startup. Let that sink in for a second, right? Conflict, which you have been told forever is a bad thing. You have timeout because you had a fight of some sort, right? Conflict is good, because you do not know if the other person shares exactly the same thought as you unless you have compared notes and find out that there's some parts that don't line up. That's a conflict. That's a conflict of knowledge, of ideas. So you need to make sure that you become okay with conflict. Not the yelling kind, but the good kind. And how do you do with nebulous direction? Last year we had several students who went through our program, and at the end they decided, wow, you know what? I can't deal with the fact that I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. That generally means that startup land is not for you, right? Because you don't know what you're going to be doing every day, almost every day of your life, if you're doing a startup, right? You just have to figure it out as it happens. So understanding in more detail what the value, and I don't know why it's not going forward. Weirdly, that oops. Let's see if that'll work. Technology. Maybe I'll just skip that slide, because apparently that's having some issues. All right. So games are about assessing how you and your teammates make decisions, anticipate issues, and contribute. By the way, it's not just startups, but in business. You are not paid to get an A at work. You are paid to make decisions and to execute them. So that's what you're going to be expected to do this week, is to make decisions. Here's a concept that we haven't talked about that much, but empathy is really key. Most of you guys have worked in teams, but what we want you guys to do is to really think about what's going on in your teammates' heads. right? Why are they acting the way they are? Why are they making the decisions that they're making? Because that will help you understand how to communicate with them if you know what's going on in their heads. So you're going to have to be constantly trying to figure out how the other person is calculating things out so that you can be effective. This is all about being effective. And so I'm going to ask you guys over the course of the week, when you guys are dealing with your issues, I'm going to ask a really basic question, which is, would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? Because a lot of these conflicts end up becoming a contest of who is more right than the other, as your entire team is losing because it's wasting its time, right? So I'll be asking you guys that a lot. So it comes down to behavior, psychology, and culture. And these games can be culturally interpreted. You'll see some French students here. You know, we want you guys to work with students from other countries, and you'll see very quickly some things that are very, very French about you, right? Berkeley kids, you'll see what is very, very Berkeley about you as you work with other people from other cultures. And remember, don't default to the other person is stupid, right? That's probably the last thing you want to think about after all the other reasons that you go through. But think about other people have gone through other experiences different than you, and that will factor in on how to work with them. All right, so a couple of things. We will not give you many instructions. And in fact, I'm going to give you a few in a second on the next game we're going to play. We're going to give you a few notable constraints. It will require some out-of-the-box thinking or some risk-taking. Curveballs, and so we reserve the right to change the game however we want at any time, just because we want to make it interesting and we want you to learn, and we don't want you to game the system, because we know you're really smart and you'll try to find every loophole and corner. All right? It's a competitive environment. Activity can be observed by everyone else, so don't be too focused on what you're doing. You might want to look around as well, just a hint. We're going to do a lot of these in small, diverse teams, and then we are going to do a postmortem the next day, okay? A couple other things. Reflection is key, so we want you to develop self-awareness. We want you to become honest about the things that you're great at, things that you might suck at. It is okay to suck at something. It just means you've had plenty of time to be really awesome at something else, right? Be inquisitive about your failures. Figure out why you failed. Why didn't that experiment work? Why did that customer not buy something? Be inquisitive about what happened there, and then document your progress. Typically in our classes, we ask everyone to keep a video blog and a blog. Not sure, I'll talk to Vicki about that, but that's something you guys should do regularly. Document the decisions that you made in that day. If that's all you capture, list the 3-4 decisions you make in that day, and capture that over a couple weeks. You'll look back and you're like, wow, I'm making the same mistakes over and over and over again, right? It's really an amazing thing to watch. All right, so rules of engagement as we go into this first game. Take risks. It's okay to fail. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to discover you are not an entrepreneur. In any given room of 100 people, because we'll have about 100 people, there will be probably about 10 naturals in there, which means even if they had an opportunity to run a multi-billion-dollar company, they would still quit their job and still do the startup because that's just who they are. It's just a group of people who are just that crazy. And then there's a group somewhere in the middle who, given the right conditions, maybe they met the right co-founder, they saw the right opportunity, that they have the right mentor, become entrepreneurs. And that is the vast majority of companies that are started today are people who are in that category. And then there's the group of people who should probably stay as PhD scientists or become accountants or lawyers because they like the rules, they like the certainty, and that's okay because we all need those kinds of jobs as well. It's great to figure that out now before you invest too much time in becoming an entrepreneur.
Until they learn that when they become a partner at the law firm or the accounting firm, that they have to go get customers and sell them.
Yes, you're always going to have to sell. That's the other thing. Yes. So to Iklak's point, you can never get away from needing some of these skills. All right, so we're going to go into the exercise now, the game. First, I want to, if you're from France, can you stand up? Look at that. All right. If you guys can sit down for a second. If you're from Chile, can you stand up? Got the Chileans here. Great. All right. How about Brazil? All right, we got some Brazilians here. How about the World Cup winning Germany folks? Yay! How about Mexico? Are you guys here? Oh, great. Mexico's here. Monterey Tech. All right, Czech Republic. Nice. There we go. Yes. All right, Korea. Yes, we've got someone from Korea. Spain. Perfect. All right, and then Dubai. Cameron, I have you as Dubai. So we've got almost every continent represented here except for Australia and Antarctica. This is going to be interesting. We've got, and Berkeley. Can you stand up if you're from Berkeley? All right, so we're going to do a game here. We're going to have you guys, if you look at your name tags, you have a sticker, a colored sticker. If you are red, you stay in this room. Don't move yet. If you're red, you're in this room. If you're the other colors, you can go outside. We have different rooms for you. But you have about 20 minutes as your groups. You guys need to listen. As a group, figure out a way to memorize each other's names. And you will be expected to know everybody's name in your cohort, okay? We're not going to give you a way to do this. You have to come up as a team, a way to memorize everybody's names. All right?